Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ready, Set, Action. It's your weekly guide to navigating the world of business growth. I'm Christina Whitmer. I'm a marketing veteran, and I'm joined by Deborah Horowitz. She is an HR and talent leader. Each week, we bring you some actionable tips and insights specifically designed for small business owners, marketing directors, and head of sales and marketing. Today, we're going to dive into some in depth discussions on marketing and sales topics and hopefully give you some strategies you can implement. Uh, Today, we want to welcome our special guest this week, Guillermo Avila. He is an expert on project consulting, project rescue, enterprise level programs, and enterprise resource planning, and also CIO advisory. So, welcome, Guillermo.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. So, why don't you introduce yourself briefly? And then we've got a couple questions. We want to learn a few things from you today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, name is Guillermo Avila. We started the company this July will be year 6 for us. We're located in Greenville, South Carolina. Was in consulting for quite a while and then decided I think I have kind of a different approach to some things and decided to jump off the bridge of entrepreneurship and decided about 6 years ago to make a go at this. So my wife and I have been going strong ever since then and continuing to add more and more people to our team, which has been great.
And the name of the organization is 365 Digital Technologies?
That is correct.
Excellent. Just in case somebody wants to find you after we're
Absolutely.
done with the episode. Yeah. So that's cool. And you and your wife are doing business together. My husband and I are not that brave. So kudos.
It's funny. We hear that a lot from people. They're like, how can you guys work with each other? I mean, we've been married for 33 years. It kind of comes natural that we just work together.
Well, that's fantastic. Thinking about what we wanted to find out about what you do today on this session, I'm really curious because I don't know a lot about ERP systems. Give us an idea of the most critical factors that a small business owner should consider in order to avoid any common pitfalls or any project failures.
Yeah, I think most people would probably have heard of something like QuickBooks, especially us as small business owners would be familiar with what that is. So I would say that at the very fundamental level, QuickBooks is kind of that beginner level of like we're managing our finances. But when we start talking ERP, we start incorporating as companies finance, manufacturing, distribution, HR, logistics, all of these things like start to come together. And so typically what we would see is a growing company that's gone from small to mid-size and they're still managing a lot of their efforts in QuickBooks, but they've outgrown that. And outgrowing the product, they're running into a lot of problems. And so typically what we do is we just advise them. Here are some like mid-level type ERP packages you can look at. Here are some great partners that are out there that could really take you to some success. And where we generally stay on is as an advisor or as a project manager to the client to try to help facilitate that implementation. We see that small company now becoming a mid-sized company. And so their needs are different. Their platforms, the software that they need is all different. So that's typically where we come in at.
I'm just curious, you talked about when something like QuickBooks stops meeting their needs. Are there a few signs that it's not working? Like very obvious ones, like the communication's broken down or something like that?
Yeah, communication breaks down. What we see often is when you've got the person in an accounting role or maybe someone who's working in on the shop floor where all of a sudden we're very dependent on spreadsheets because the platform simply can't do it for us anymore, which for anyone who's running even a small, mid-sized business, even a large business, of course, but when you're relying on spreadsheets for information, it's dangerous, especially if that person leaves and no one knows how these spreadsheets all came together. We've run into some cases where we had former controllers had 6, 7 different spreadsheets that all fed from one to the next. And if you didn't do it in the exact order, it was disastrous, right? And so when that
Uh-huh.
person leaves, unless you know that's how they set up their spreadsheets, it's never going to give you the right answer. And so typically what we advise is when you're starting to lean in on a lot of spreadsheets to supplement work you could be doing in something that combines all the work, like in an ERP, you got to start taking a look at something different.
That's smart.
So if you're moving into that next realm as maybe the marketing director or whoever's going to be over the communication of this transition, how do you advise them on how to communicate the value that goes into this project or implementation, both for the end user as well as all of the other stakeholders?
Yeah, this is actually pretty key because one of the problems that we run into, especially when we do rescues, is it seems as though the implementation is being led by a department when it really needs to be represented by the whole company. So, like when we come into something, we'll tell the CEO or the CFO of a company, we need you at the kickoff meeting. The entire company needs to see that you are behind this thing. So, what we typically do, especially when we're working with some of the marketing folks of a company, is we'll connect them with an OCM person on our teams. If anyone's not familiar with that term, it's an organizational change manager. And what we'll do is we'll sit down with that person and say, here are some things that we think are important for you as an organization in terms of how you communicate. A lot of what we do when we work with marketing folks is we'll say, here's an email blast that you should be sending off maybe weekly. Sometimes we'll stand up a SharePoint site where users can go to and they can find recordings of past sessions, status reports. We'll do employee highlights or spotlights, interviews, and things like that. But we create like a one place where everyone can go to. And because communication is really big, as soon as you stop and you turn off that spigot of communication, everyone feels like they're blind and you start to see a lot of problems because employees will start to make up stories in their head. So if they don't think it's going well because they're not hearing things, then they're going to assume things are not going well. And so we always have to over communicate how things are going with the project.
Oh, that's smart. I bet that resonates with you, Deb. I know Deb deals a lot with employee retention and onboarding, and those signals start to get too much too very fast.
Well, you know what's funny too is sometimes what we think as over communication is not enough for the business. So there was a point where at one company we were at, we had a SharePoint site stood up where people can go in, get communications. We send out a weekly status report. And then we met with the whole business every other week where there'd be 40, 50 people on the call. And we looked at this and said, okay, this is successful. Like we're over communicating. Well, we find out from the C-level folks, yeah, the folks actually want to meet a lot more. They feel
Yeah.
like they're hearing things at the tail end of when things are being done. They want to hear the midweek success reports, so then we have to adjust how things are going.
So I'm curious, I know since Project Rescue is on an area of your specialties, that sounds pretty, I would enjoy that. About it. But what are some early warning signs that a project is headed towards trouble? Like, what are the signs and then how do you approach that?
So like our project rescues, to put in context for anyone listening, like how when we talk rescue, it's not like, hey, the project is a week or two past its deliverable date. That the type of things that we're getting are major. So when we talk project rescue, I typically get a phone call from a C-level person that says, we are a year or 2 years past when we were supposed to go live.
What?
Our budget is over by $2 to $3 million. We need you to come in and fix this thing. So it's very volatile. When we walk in, there's a lot of friction. People are not happy with each other. They're not happy to see me. So we're typically walking into pretty bad situations. And in most cases of what we've seen, it's almost the same story, different town. And one of the first things we'll do when we show up on site, we'll say, okay, I want to see all of your status reports for the last 6 months. I want to read the story that has been told maybe since the beginning, or at least the last 6 months of the project. And typically, what we'll see is the project manager from usually the vendor site hasn't changed the color of the status to a yellow or red. It's still green, which means to me, the project is going great. But if we're going great, why are we over by $2 million? And part of what we start to find is the reporting is bad. There's not accurate information being given to the client. sometimes the client is difficult. And so sometimes it is some of their fault. But in a lot of cases, it comes down to the communication has just completely broken. And so now we're just trying to fix this thing week by week, day by day. There's really no game plan around how we're going to fix this thing, which is usually when we come in and we just start going down to the bare bones of some fundamentals in project management to try to get back on track with some of these things. In a lot of cases, what we see and what we advise folks is if you're during the duration of your project, you don't see like a green, yellow, and sometimes red, I would question something always being green because it just is not the reality. When you've got people involved, people make mistakes, and we need to be able to see a trend of how we've made mistakes, fixed it, and then we resolve it, move on. But a lot of times when we go in, we just simply don't see that history, which is where the communication broke down somewhere along the way.
That's interesting. So an early warning sign might just be that the status things aren't changing like you might expect to see
It
over
If
time.
everything sounds great, like, one thing I told a CFO that I was talking to in New York, he said, "But we were green every week." And I said, "Well, if you were green, why did you have all these change orders?" Because these change orders are reflective that you guys have gone beyond your scope, you've gone beyond your timeline. I mean, something's not right that all of a sudden we're spending more money than we budgeted, and that color is not changing. And he just said, "I just didn't know." So that's the kind of things that we walk into typically are these rescues are usually millions of dollars over budget by the time we get involved.
It sounds like this is more common than not, because otherwise your business would not exist if people didn't have these kinds of situations.
Yeah, well, this is what's so bizarre about it. We would prefer to come in at the beginning of a project and do
Mhm.
exactly that, where we're managing the project on behalf of the client, and maybe we bring the vendor in and I manage the vendor. And this is usually what happens is the client says, "Well, we think we can manage it on our own." And we say, "Okay." In fact, this just happened to us. There was something we did about 6 months ago. The client said, "We think we can save some money and we can just manage it on our own." Almost 6 months to the day, we've gotten a phone call that said, "Everything has gone bad. Can you come out here and help us?" And so now we're coming in after the fact to try to bring this thing back on track where we could have just done it from the very beginning. And we unfortunately see that a lot. So where we would prefer to come in at the beginning, we've been surprised at how much of our business is spent is actually doing rescues because of how badly things go.
I see a lot of times the implementation of, certain programs, technology is meant to align goals and create efficiencies with processes. If I were the head of sales of an organization that's setting up a new enterprise system, what advice would you give me as to how to align that system with the sales goals and the processes?
So probably something that would be familiar in your world. This was a project we did. It took us about 2 years to fix would be CRM, for instance. One of the things that we ran into that the CRM project went off the rails. We came in, we were able to get it back on track. And I asked the vice president of sales, like, what's your intention with the tool? And he couldn't tell me. And so we all sat down with all the salespeople, and every single one of those people had different intentions for CRM. So part of what we had to align on is how do you know what we're creating if you don't know what you want? Everyone just knew the word CRM. We need a CRM. We need a CRM. Everybody had a different idea of what CRM was going to be used for. And so when the implementer came in, unfortunately, they didn't do a great job at understanding what the business was asking for, and things went off the rails. And there was very little to any documentation in terms of the requirements. There wasn't anything being kept like from a risk or issue log. And the basic core fundamentals just weren't there to even give them a CRM. So we had to go back to just ground level efforts and level set. What do you all want out of a CRM? What kind of reporting do you want coming out of the CRM? Do you want it to integrate with anything? And then we started building what would be the foundation of building a CRM package for them. We were able to get them to what they needed and deliver them a good product. But again, like it worries me when even at a C level, if you can't tell me what the product is, but you're sponsoring it, I'd be pretty concerned that you're not really sure what you want.
And then if you're not sure what you want, then you can get anything as a result of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think what some of the misperception is out there is that these packages just work out of the box without you having to do anything. We install it and everyone has it on their desktop. Go use it.
I wish.
It doesn't work that way, right? Everyone has a different need or want out of it. I mean, because what we came out of with that package was your sales folks have an incredibly different need than your customer service folks. And when you start going around, the service folks need something different than the field people who need to service the machines. Very different thing. It came down to they didn't even know how to break down the requirements between all the different departments. They kind of thought, well, we all want this, so it's just going to work out of the box, right? And it's just, no, it doesn't work that way. We've got to configure something up for you and your line of business. And it takes time and effort, which is not what they expected. And of course, because they had no documentation, or at least very little of it, there was no good symbiotic CRM to ERP relationship. It was very fragmented.
Wow. I'm curious a little bit about your CIO advisory services. I'd love to know just more in general about that. But if you're the CEO of a small to mid-sized business, how do I use your type of services to make technology decisions or efficiency decisions? Tell me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. So for myself, I was a former CIO before going into consulting. So that's my past life. And a lot of the folks that we have on our team have very similar backgrounds where we've been in ranks in IT before transitioning into consulting. And one of the things that we looked at is we've got small to mid-sized companies that want to play with some of the really big boys that are out there, but they don't have enough money to just bring on a CIO. But they could afford to have somebody, whether it's myself or someone else on the team, give 5 to 10 hours a week advising, maybe even speaking at a board level to just give an agnostic view in terms of what's needed at the organization. One of the really big things that you guys have all heard about is like cybersecurity, really huge thing, right? So we're able to bring someone in, let them do some work to set them up, and then we can go ahead and move on our way, but stay within the hours that they've given us. And that's what we try to do in terms of small to mid-size is just make sure that our clients are taken care of and that they're getting the same value that a larger company would. We're just doing it in smaller buckets of hours. But those IT needs never go away, whether you're looking at things from a marketing perspective where we might have someone on our team that could help with CRM, might be something, or whether it's looking at what do we do from a social media perspective. We'll have someone from our team that can give you kind of a ear that they can lend and you can talk through strategies that way. What do we do in rebuilding our website? We want to connect our shopping carts to our ERP. What do we do there? Those are all things that we would say with the hours that we're given, we try to assist with and try to help set some vision so the company knows how they can move forward with growing their company.
Yeah. And you said you are agnostic about, different things. I do find that any fractional or agency or whatever resource you use, one of the biggest benefits is that you're going to get recent experience with other businesses. And also, you don't get caught up in the politics of a business. Sometimes it can be a big help, I think.
Absolutely. Because part of what we would like to think we separate ourselves from in terms of the big, big consulting firms that are out there. I don't have any intention, and it's why I left the really big consulting firms that were out there is it wasn't uncommon for them to embed themselves into an organization where they never left. And we've been brought in at times in that fractional CIO role. And I've told the C-level person, you guys are ready to hire someone. And in one case, we went ahead and helped them hire someone that would replace me as a fractional guy. I get it. I'm losing a contract, but that's not the way I want to look at things. And I don't have my folks look at things. I don't want to embed myself there for the lifetime of a contract. We're trying to look for what's best for the client, even if that means that our contract is over. We just don't see ourselves as the way our company is set up where we're staying someplace forever. Generally, we have a start and end to the way our contracts are laid out.
And that makes sense. Thinking back to what you had said previously about making sure they understand what the goals are and what is to be accomplished from implementing these various systems or projects. And it sounded to me a lot like change management was a big component of how you help them go through this process. And I'm thinking, what are some of the key strategies that you help your client to create so they can manage this best and minimize the disruptions and, heaven forbid, have to be rescued?
Right, right, right. It's funny when we go into some of these implementations, or even we have a client that says potentially, hey, there's an OCM component maybe you could help us dig into a little bit. We're trying to get to that next level of our business, but we're not quite sure how to get there. And so we start talking through some things. And usually I get a kick. It's the same question I ask, and I get the answer almost the same every single time. And I'll ask the question, okay, so let's take a process. Let's just figure this out. How long have you guys been doing this process? Oh gosh, we've been doing it for 20, 30 years. And I'll ask, so why do you do it this way? And they answer, because we've always done it this way. So who put this in place? I don't know. I was trained to do it this way. And so what we start to do is we challenge how they do it and we start breaking it apart, that in many cases processes were developed because some technology didn't exist to do it. So it made sense 20 years ago, but it doesn't make sense now. And so from an OCM perspective, we start to challenge a lot of the users to challenge the system and create something new, leverage the technology that's there. Don't be afraid of change. It's okay. In a lot of cases, we need to meet with the business to really just give them some coaching of how to handle change, because you'll have employees that have been at a place for 30 something years. They don't want to change. I've been doing it the same way and I'm pretty happy with how I do it. And so we need to walk them through the process. It's okay, change. And that change is going to make it better for you.
Good. I guess whether you're involved at the stage or not, like if a business has had a failed ERP or large scale project implementation, like what are those first steps they should take to recover and move forward? And maybe not even move forward, but just prepare to move forward. What do you think that looks like?
You come to a point where if you're bleeding out, you got to just cover your wound to stop the bleeding. At some point, you got to realize moving forward with a project is just causing us to hemorrhage and bleed more and more. And at some point, we need to just look at our project and realize we are not experts in what we are trying to do. And in most all cases that we're involved with, there's a vendor who, whether on purpose or not, is moving that project forward, and they're continuing to take more and more billable hours from it while the client has no idea how to fix the problem that's causing them to bleed out. And so if anyone out there is experiencing that, it's number one, it's easier to put the project on hold and
Mhm.
say, let's stop this thing. And then reaching out to a company like ours or other companies that do things very similar, where we can come in and help you figure out how to get out of this situation. And in many cases, our clients say, we need you to manage the vendor. Like, we don't even know what to do with them anymore. Can you help us? Just, we will bring you in to manage them, manage the expectations, manage the relationship, but we need to get out of this mess. And that's typically what we do is we'll come in. We have one client of ours in the Midwest who says that they like using our services for projects now because they consider us the watchdog of their company. And so if we see a vendor that's about to go off the rails, we meet with those C-level folks immediately and say, we think this thing is going south like real quick. And we prep them for news that we're expecting that may not be good. And that's the way we look at ourselves, is that we're simply the eyes and ears of our client. And we just try to make sure that they're being taken care of so they're not taken advantage of.
I think you've said that phrase off the rails a few times. So it sounds like that's your business,
It
getting on
is.
the rail.
I try to keep it on the rails. I
Yes.
prefer it. I mean, it just is a lot more pleasant.
Every time you say that, I think of Ozzy Osbourne. Going
Good
off the
one.
rails
No.
on this crazy train.
Very cool. Well, this has been very insightful. So Deb, you have any more questions? Are we good?
I think we are good, that it really has been insightful. And I think that just having that understanding that resources like your company exist for people and they don't have to go it alone and they can have that expert on board from the get go. And even, I guess, before the get go, I'm sure you could probably help them figure out like which direction to go in, right? Like you were talking about with the CRM. So I think that that's some important information to get out there. And we really thank you for your time today.
I appreciate you having me on and just listening to the great ramblings of an ERP guy. So
No, it's good. Clearly, if you don't watch the stuff, the money can get off the rails very quickly.
absolutely. In fact, I think that's inspiration for me that if I'm ever going to write a book on what we do, I'm
Mhm.
just going to call it Off the Rails and just go from there.
I
All
love
right. Well, make sure you mention Christina and
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it. All right. So, thank everybody for listening. We hope you found today's episode helpful. Thanks to Guillermo for joining us. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Spotify so that you can never miss an update from Ready Set Action. Until next time.